Welcome to Chats with ChangeMakers, where I, Elsa from Sonderhouse, speak with leaders of successful, customer-driven companies about their journeys. Today, I speak with Nicolas Stephan, co-founder and managing director of Sparrks. Sparrks is a digital business coaching platform that provides companies access to top-level business coaches. The special sauce? Reducing the amount of necessary sessions from an average 16 to maximum 4. This way, more businesses can afford to train their staff on essential leadership skills and enable personal and professional growth. Sparrks is a bootstrapped company of 17 people, having launched 2 years ago. Their impressive customer base includes Audi, Bain Co, and sennder technologies. Enjoy the episode.
Thank you very much for being here. I'm Nicolas, as you just mentioned. I'm one of the two co-founders of Sparrks. Sparrks is a B2B business coaching platform. So we are offering companies one-on-one business coaching for their talents and leaders in order for them to thrive in their roles and ultimately the companies to be more effective and better. We thought, hey, isn't there a way to get this coaching or get these super experienced top business coaches in front of an audience that is younger? How can one do that? Well, why can't one do it? Because it is quite time intensive. Time intensive is also cost intensive. You can't, of course, spend so much money on so many people. So we thought, hey, why not try to deliver what in normal coaching is being done in 10 to 16 sessions on average in lesser sessions, right? So we talked to a few coaches, HR leaders, 1 or 2 learning psychologists, and many of them said, well, for the topics that you would like to address, the ones that I've before mentioned, like leadership development, like how to become effective leader, how to delegate effectively, how to communicate effectively, you don't always necessarily need 10 or 15 sessions, right? Sometimes you can deliver most of the value or the insights and the individual lever that you can bring as a coach in a very short period of time. And we thought, okay, well, doesn't that somehow sounds reasonable? And we just started out. So we started out, we have luckily quite large networks, both from consulting as well as from startup times. And we tested out very, very simple, no tech more or less, with giving friends, colleagues, be it in consulting or be it people who then moved into leadership roles in corporate, business coaching. We, of course, are not business coaches ourselves. We had a network of coaches. Some of them we asked, hey, do you want to try this out in a very short 4-session, maximum 4-session format for a very specific individual development need, right? And we tried it out. Nowadays, things are super easy. Everyone knows how to use Zoom or MS Teams or any other online video format people feel comfortable with nowadays. So you don't need to do it in person. So we just brought the person to be coached and the coach together in that environment, provided some basic information beforehand, and saw what came out of 2, 3, or 4 of these coaching sessions. And what people thereafter said is, wow, I would not have thought that I could get so much valuable stuff in so short period of a time for me, in order for me to develop further. And it was eye-opening for us. It wasn't 5 people, it was 35 or 40 people.
Okay.
The coaches did it for free. And
so just you had like basically kind of like a beta launch, sort of, where you tested, you iterated.
Yeah, so there was...
And they were 35 to 40
people that we did it with.
Kind of people, yeah. Leaders that you did it with.
Right, I mean, we thought, okay, who do we want to test it with, right? It should be from a different age groups, I would say, or experience groups in different industries, so not only service industries, but also manufacturing, wheresoever, right? And that was before we officially started, right? So it's just people that we knew.
And this was very broad, or did you already zoom in on startups and scale-ups or whatever, like the businesses who usually cannot afford it?
Yeah, so at that point, very good point. So at that point, we did not specify the target audience in terms of the company, because we wanted to first see, does the end customer, does that person really value it, right? The end customer being the person we're training. The person we're training is not paying for it, it's their employer. But first to see, okay, ultimately the person who's being trained, they need to like the product. They need to love the product in order for you to be able to do a follow-on sales, right? Because if they don't love it, well, you might be able to sell it in the first place if you're a good salesperson. the end users don't use it, well, then you don't build up a client base and you build bigger, right? So first we need to make sure that ultimately the product really works for the end user. It is nice to have very, very big clients, and it's nice we've got those logos on the website, but you also got to think, okay, where do I allocate my time when it comes to sales at the very moment correctly, right? Because it might be beautiful if you have a large client, it might take a long time to get there, to get them, because there's a lot of decision makers in there, etc. And then the question is, okay, can you serve them well? Yes, of course you can if it's in a certain part of the organization, country organization, something, but on a global scale, not so well. So what we've defined at the moment, our sweet spot is roughly between 1,000 and 5,000 employees. Most of the companies, yes, we do have scale-ups as well. Famous scale-ups from Berlin. But most companies, I would say, many companies are these hidden champions, German Mittelstand, 1,000 to 5,000 people who have development programs for their leaders, but who would like to upgrade those to know, okay, we would like to do more, we should do more. We see there's change in their company happening out of whatsoever reason. And yeah, somehow this panned out to be, from a size perspective, our sweet spot.
Going from 0 to 10 when you start, going from 0 clients to the first 10, and especially in the audience that you want. And I had a conversation recently with somebody who said you can only build a successful business if the target audience is where you come from, or you already know them, or it is your industry. Which I find a very interesting, slightly polarizing, but very interesting remark. I feel it myself too, right? I service startups and scale-ups and I've been in them as a leader for a very long time. So I do see that it's easier. And I hear you say the same thing, right? You instantly knew your reference customers because you plucked them out of your personal network. Do you think it is possible to do what you're doing, like instantly targeting these big boys, like the whales, if you don't come from the industry, if you don't have such a personal network?
I mean, you yourself just said it's a polarizing perspective. So I would say, well, I assume it is possible. It might just be more difficult, right? And I hope it came through. The story that is just told how we got to what we do is we didn't come and thought, hey, we got a brilliant idea, let's see whether there's a need for it. We saw, hey, it seems like the company that we worked in and in our clients that there is a certain need, be it verbally uttered or not. There's a certain need. And now how can we serve that need best? And now, obviously, I mean, the point that the guy was apparently making is to some degree valid, because if you have some insights, it might help you. You know the nuances, right? You might know where some pain points are. I assume it is more difficult to figure out, okay, where are actually pain? Where is pain? Where is a need if you don't have any touch points with a certain environment, right? Is it possible? Yes, I think so. Is it more difficult? Totally yes, right? And then other point, as you just mentioned, of course, network helps, right? In the very beginning.
A lot of avenues that are familiar, right? Like one of them is cold calling, or nowadays reaching out on LinkedIn in mail, which is new cold calling, has become new cold calling. Advertising, classical sales, which I think similar to cold calling or different ways. Being there, present on conferences, online marketing, online advertising. What works, what didn't work, and what did you learn also? Like, how were you proven wrong?
That's a very, very good question. Thank you so much for that one. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we're a bootstrap company, right? I mean, just took some funds from my co-founder and myself to start a studio. Right. So exactly. So you don't have too much bandwidth for making mistakes. And you really, really need to think about, where do I allocate my financial resources most wisely now and in the near to midterm future. And with that, maybe another mistake we might have made, not product related, but maybe sales, marketing related, is we maybe have invested too early into marketing, right? We started with, okay, we thought we need some marketing to get the product, communication a bit rounder, etc. However, if you're beyond building a website, so to say, with some marketing support and with the right wording, slogans, well, of course, marketing is there to support sales or get you inbound sales as well. And we saw, well, you actually nowadays need quite a lot of money in order for that thing to work, because you're not the only one on the market. So you need to have relatively deep pockets in order for marketing to work for the purpose that you want. I don't know. Yeah, but exactly something in between. If you reach out to any agency and ask them, hey, can you support us in our marketing? You say, yeah, sure, gladly do that. These are our consulting fees, and then we need a budget for your size, roughly of 15K or whatever, a month in order for it to make sense. Yeah. And I buy that. I don't buy the product, but I understand it. And then when I thought, okay, does it make sense for me now to invest these 15K plus service fees at the very moment into marketing, where I know this hopefully will pay off, but it takes quite a while to pay off, right? So if you think from a cash flow perspective, well, if you've got funding, you might be able to do that. If you don't, well, you need to also pay your people somehow and your coaches, so you maybe not. So I think we started out, well, focusing a bit on marketing a bit too early. Nevertheless, we continue with it, not with a budget. So we did it in the beginning, still now actually on a very limited budget with what we think, okay, is the bare minimum that's required in order for do the bare necessities.
Which channels are you using?
In marketing in itself, on marketing, well, of course, Google advertisements, LinkedIn, quite a lot of, most of it actually goes into content writing, content production.
It's a lot of content.
Right, yeah. Exactly. Because you also want to build trust, right? And that you know what you're selling or what you're talking about. And then I think we could have gone into sales earlier, not sales from my co-founder and me. We did it before we even founded the company, so to say, right?
Like, I think in the early phases, you are doing sales because you're kind of validating whether your idea is
right. Exactly. We'll think that way around. Exactly. Yes. So yeah, you validate the product. Yeah. And that's how somehow ends up in a sale, right? And then of course you got to continue with it, but you need to also scale it up. Yeah. And then I think we could have started earlier with hiring people who are doing sales, right? Proper sales. In between thought, and I think we also had a little campaign where we were writing sales messages and in there offered to try the product for free, not for free, but with a satisfaction guarantee, so that if your expectations are not surpassed, you wouldn't have to pay for a pilot of five people. It's smaller than we usually would do for a pilot. We wouldn't have to pay. Right? It was just okay. Now, as some companies might have some economic difficulties, so to say, budgets might be constrained a bit more. Maybe professional development budgets might go down. So maybe if people have less budget for now, their threshold of trying something that costs something might be higher. Yeah. Right? So we thought we'd try it out, but didn't result in any difference. Right? So we just stopped that because.
To businesses, especially the size that you're talking to, price sensitivity is not such a big thing, unless maybe when you talk to procurement, where they are not the end users. But I think when it comes to investing in whether your leadership team is going to learn something, the jump to being actually happier to pay a bit more because you feel like I think it's all of psychology, right? We're in sales.
Absolutely, yeah.
About human psychology and human nature. And if I'm speaking to an HR person or a procurement person or a department head, and they need to argue that they might have the right decision picking Sparrks. They need to be able to defend themselves, right? Yes. They're not the end user, but they need to protect their status. They did not do something stupid by choosing you. And I think you're stupid to choose the lowest, the cheapest, right? Because you're very likely to get low quality. You might be stupid getting the most expensive one, but you might want to be over here in price. Is that something that you see?
I assume it depends on what the value is that you get out of it, or what you think the value is that you get out of it, right? Out of the product. And right, we have not often, we have it sometimes, but relatively infrequent that someone says this is overall too expensive.
Yeah.
Some people break it down, calculate it, okay, per hour this would cost me. And they say, well, true, but everything else is included in there. You don't have to think about anything. You get like onboarding, you get your like tailoring, you get your analysis, and there's no other way that you would get access to this type of executive coaches for the price point, right? But if they look at the packages and they say, okay, it's fair, and where people are not convinced that, okay, it's worth its money, or if it's exactly the right thing for the target group, they can, of course, do a pilot program with us. Again, as I said, like 10 or 15 people. It's exactly the same experience as if they really roll it out in their organization. But after that, well, you clearly see with those 10 or 15 people that are representative for the target groups, is it something that really wows them away? Where they say, wow, awesome? Or where they say, yeah, it was nice, right? And if it's just nice, no, you don't want to roll it out to your organization and you don't want to fight for it. But if you tried it out, you know how usually we have the decision makers also test it out. Well, you know what the product is, and it's much easier for you than towards procurement, towards the ultimate decision maker to defend it is worth its money, right? And we've been lucky with it. I mean,
I wanted to dive very quickly into the bootstrap thing, of
yeah,
course, because
sure.
it's very interesting.
Yeah.
I guess that's a very conscious decision. I would also know why, and if you're ever thinking about raising funds at a later stage, or you never do that. Yeah.
Never say never. And I think my co-founder, Ivy, maybe you figured that out during the podcast. We're pretty pragmatic people, I think. So very conscious decision, and I think there's no right or wrong. There are some business models where you have to raise money. There are some business models where maybe no one really wants to give you money, where it doesn't make too much sense. And there are business models where you can do both, right? We have also competitors who raised money. In our environment, you could do both, I think, but you got to look at the business model first. Is it possible? Is it possible to kick off that business, make it flourish, make it grow, and remain relevant on the market without external funding? And then the second question is, I think it should not be, do I not want to raise money, but do I want to raise money, right? And I've talked to a bunch of founders, investors, and many of them say, well, if I go back, or the next thing that I want to do, I want to do something bootstrapped as well, right? And it's good to ask myself the question, do I want external money, or what do I want it for? And we made a conscious decision. Of course, there are pros and cons to both. Yes, you don't necessarily have those marketing budgets from the beginning on. Yes, you don't have the articles in the nice magazines. Sparrks raised so many millions here and there, right? Personally, like from a Nicolas has a crown on his head perspective, I couldn't care less whether it's there or not. But of course, it helps, for example, for attracting people. Do I think it is right? No. But is it reality? Yes, right? It's the world that we live in. But on the other hand, of course, you have freedom to do what you want to do, so to say, do what you think is the best for the business, and to have one stakeholder group less to spend time with, so you can focus more on the business. So it was a very, very conscious decision. Of course, we're thinking, okay, should we raise money, not raise money? And it's something that we every now and then reevaluate. And then we say, okay,
you could scale faster, I guess, right? You could
scale faster, but you also need to think, okay, what's your end game, right? Scaling faster is nice, having more people is nice, having more clients is nice, but where do you want to land it in the midterm or the long term?
Especially quality.
And what do you want to do?
Right?
Yeah.
You scale too fast, maybe you lose quality.
That too, right? I wouldn't be afraid of having a larger team or something. But I think, okay, what's the best for the product and for our existing clients? What's the highest likelihood that we can expand that client base and get new clients on the one hand? But also you can think of what has, in my opinion, the best risk-benefit ratio. right? So you reevaluate every now and then and say, okay, we make a decision. Let's go the next X month. Let's not talk about that for now. Let's execute. And then we sit down again, look at the numbers and think, okay, do we want to still follow that route or not? And focus less on marketing, as I've mentioned before in the beginning, especially when you're bootstrapped. Of course, depending on the business model that you're having, there are other business models that are just relying on it. But if you do something like what we did in the B2B sector, go for the sales first, see whether it's with what you're having, try to build a client base and don't worry about the buzz on the streets. Mm-hmm. I think there's one point, and you asked me for one, but another one is don't underestimate the focus and time you need to put into building your own team. Right. Which we didn't talk about it yet. We don't need to talk about it in this podcast, but it's obviously super important, and it is not easy to build an environment with people where people grow, where they're very driven, high energy, optimistic, and really go the extra mile. Even in times where things might be more stressful, but maybe a bit more pressure, stuff like that. So how do you find the right people? And how do you actually create and foster an environment where people from diverse backgrounds really thrive?
Thank you for watching Chats with ChangeMakers. I'm Else from Sonderhouse. We help startups and scale-ups achieve product market fit and unlock commercial growth.